This is Hispanic Heritage Month from September 15th to October 15th. And so we'll be doing a little bit of program today from the IDEA team. Also, a little bit of a shout out to a program the IDEA team's doing, Centro, which is an amazing organization. They actually have been doing a lot of stuff for helping people in their lifestyle to live in better areas, helping people get settled, helping people do a variety of things. And it's been a strikingly growing organization and very effective in the Hispanic community. Dr. Menendez Kohler, she's actually been leading that, great leader for the past 10 years. She's going to be here on the 26th of September at noon to do a program, and I highly recommend it. I had a conversation with her and a few leaders from the UW a few months ago, and I was just inspired by her work, to say the least. So going forward then for today, we do have a nice program for you, and I'm going to kick it off to Amy Wyatt and Elizabeth Hilton, who are actually going to start leading that. And it is about Hispanic Heritage Month. It's about sharing what we're doing across the agency on honoring Hispanic heritage through collections, through stories, through all of our work across the agency. And I'll give it to the both of you to start. Thank you, Amy. And thanks for listening, everybody.
Hi, everybody. Amy Wyatt from the SHPO office. This idea kind of came about in IDEA team because we started talking about Hispanic Heritage Month and what people were doing in different divisions across the society, and people not knowing what other divisions were doing to collect and preserve Hispanic heritage stories. So we're just trying to give you a flavor today. It's not trying to be comprehensive of everything that's happening, of course. So if you have questions or things that aren't covered here that you want to bring up, definitely feel free to do that. And we just hope this is an opportunity for people to learn what others are doing and opportunities for collaboration and see what your colleagues are up to and where these pieces might fit together. So I'm going to start out, next slide, please, talking about a grant that the SHPO office got from the National Park Service, an underrepresented communities grant. The National Park Service created this grant program to diversify the properties listed in the National Register of Historic Places to make sure that we're telling the full story of everyone in our country. And so recognizing that a study found that only 8% of the 86,000 historic places listed in the National Register were associated with African American, American Latino, Asian American, American Indian, or other minority communities. So that's not to say that people from those communities didn't live and participate in things that were happening at these historic places, but they're not documented in the National Register, that specific history. So as part of this project, to tell the full story here in Wisconsin, we requested $50,000 to research historic places in Wisconsin that represent Latinx history, because we've not yet listed any of those in the National Register in our state. And we have very few properties in our historic properties database that are identified as related to Latinx history. So that's a gap in our knowledge that we're trying to fix through this grant. Next slide, please. So we're working with Sergio Gonzalez, who is a professor at Marquette University. He's also a member of our State Preservation Review Board and the author of the press book, Mexicans in Wisconsin. He's going to work with us and a student to research and prepare a historic context document for historic Latinx places in Wisconsin. In preservation, a historic context is a research document that synthesizes information about the history and culture and geography of a subject so that you can put all of that information together, and it helps you identify, document, evaluate historic places in that context. So how do we identify historic properties that have a Latinx history? How do we evaluate them to figure out which ones are the most significant and would be eligible for the National Register? So here are just a few properties that are in our database that we're looking at now that have a history related to the Latinx community. So maybe taking a different look at things that are already in our database, whether it's churches, businesses, community centers, and digging deeper and finding that history.
Hi, I'm Abby Norderhell. I'm the Director of Acquisitions in the Collections Division. I'm going to give a little background about our relationship with the Latinx Collective, and then the next couple of slides will delve into some of the work we've done and what we are collecting. So our relationship with the Latinx Collective started with Tess Arenas, who's the collective's founder and leader. Tess is the author of WHS Press book publication, Somos Latinas. Building on the response to her book, Tess founded the collective in January of 2020 with UW-Madison professors Dr. Marla Ramirez Tejudo, Dr. Armando Ibarra, and Dr. Almita Miranda, and then with Assistant Professor of Latinx Studies at Marquette University, Sergio Gonzalez. The collective formed with the goal of retrofitting Latinx people into the Wisconsin historical narrative. To that end, the collective is focused on oral history, archival collecting, and object collecting. The collective has more than 80 members, comprising a network of faculty, staff, and students from 6 Wisconsin universities and 2 out-of-state institutions, along with numerous community members who've been trained by the core collective team. Collective members work with members of Latinx community to find stories and collections that can be added to the Wisconsin Historical Society. The collective work related to collecting seeks, gathers, and showcases resources that correct, complicate, and/or diversify the traditional narrative. Tess and her team accept items on temporary receipt on behalf of the WHS. Collections are brought to the collections committee and are accepted with a deed of gift after the collections committee approves the acquisitions. Collective members, often alongside donors, work together to accession collection materials by arranging and describing them. Collection donors are interviewed while looking at their archival collections so that their recollections about their materials are captured. In addition, the collective may also collect more traditional oral history interviews. Once accessioning work is finalized, WHS archivists complete the cataloging and online finding and creation for these collections, and access is provided through the archives reading room. Grant funding sustains the collective work. From 2021 to 2024, the collective is operating under a Baldwin grant for oral history entitled Retrofitting Latinx History in Wisconsin. The group's focus starting in 2022 and move forward is a digital edition entitled Presente, which Daniel Hartwig will be discussing.
Thanks, Abby. Hello, everybody. So this slide provides a little bit of scope and context for all of the activities of the collective and where the digital edition fits in. Next slide, please. So what exactly is a digital edition? So this project is to provide access to primary resource materials, but much more than that, it's really to engage users with those primary resources. And so when we're talking about digital edition, we mean lesson plans, story maps, exhibits, essays, really tools beyond traditional public service materials to engage users with those materials and with those histories, and to utilize them in teaching and learning in Wisconsin and beyond. Next slide, please. So some of the unique features of this project include, in addition to digitization of new materials and existing collections, is making them full text searchable, creating transcriptions for written materials, and captioning audio visual materials, providing key metadata to allow users to access materials indexed by place, topic, entity. And really fundamentally, the real heart and soul of this project is to make it bilingual, so individuals can search metadata in both Spanish and English, as well as engage with the interface that's both Spanish and English. Next slide, please. Recognizing that we at WHS are part of a larger team, I just wanted to conclude with a little bit of a meet and greet with all the folks and many others that are working on this project, and really excited about moving this project forward and making these materials available through our new incoming digital resources. Thank you, and I'll pass it on to the next speaker.
Hi, everybody. I'm Lisa Saywell. I'm the Director of Public Services in the Collection Division. I wanted to thank Abby and Daniel for talking about our continuing collecting efforts with the Latinx community in Wisconsin. But I've been asked to talk about what do we have in our collections already. So I'll be talking a little bit about that. You can go to the next slide. All right. My job today is maybe to highlight some of the collections that we have both in the archives, in the library, and then also in our artifact collection. So that's what I'm going to be talking about. You can go to the next slide, Dan. All right. So I wanted to highlight a few of the collections that we have that are related to our WHS press titles. Somos Latinas that Abby already talked about a little bit. We have oral histories and posters and photographs that go along with that collection. And then also Obreros Hundidos is a new book by Jesus Salas. And I believe that probably Kristen's going to be talking a little bit about those later. But this takes a look inside the migrant farm workers movement in Wisconsin, and our collections contain numerous photographs, articles, and pamphlets that help document that movement. You can go. I thought I would also touch upon some of our archival collections that might be of interest to people. We try to document the Latinx experience in Wisconsin through community, prominent individuals, and political organizations to help us tell that story. One community group that I wanted to mention is La Raza. It was a nonprofit social service organization that served the Mexican American and migrant worker community in Appleton. And it created educational and community programs. And much of that work is described in the collection that we have and the newsletters that went along with that organization. We also have the records and papers of prominent Latinx individuals. Tony Baez was a leader in the Milwaukee Hispanic community who spent many years working on bilingual educational initiatives in Milwaukee. And also Sophia Sequenzia, sorry. She was very active in women's rights organizations, as well as served on pro-choice, anti-sterilization, and integration in Milwaukee school districts. She was also heavily involved in Central American causes such as the Nicaraguan brigades and the fight for democratic rights in Chile. So she was incredibly active and was a UW graduate. To also give us an understanding of the interconnectedness of Hispanic and Latinx communities across the globe, we've also collected a large number of records that focus on activities to help support political causes in Latin America. Some of these national organizations, some of these were national organizations, and some of them were based in Wisconsin. And we have a large number of, these are just a couple examples of those collections. Next slide, please. Film and television. Film and television helps create a perception of communities, both positive and negative. And our collections give a window into the complexities of various media portrayals of Hispanic and Latinx communities. Our partnership with the Wisconsin Center for Film and Theater allows us to have access to things such as scripts from Chico and the Man, or posters from that night in Rio. So various kinds of collections related to film and television, as well as we have some local television materials as well. Again, Tony Baez that I mentioned earlier worked on Adelante, a weekly television show in Milwaukee. You can go to the next slide. In addition to what you might find in the archives, there are a number of collections in the library that help document Hispanic history. Starting with El Mississippi, the first Spanish language newspaper in the United States, printed in New Orleans in 1808 to advocate for the independence of the Spanish colonies in the New World. And we do have copies of those first editions, so that's kind of exciting. Additionally, pamphlets, brochures, and other materials in the library collection include everything from community calendars to political handouts. Go to the next slide. Finally, there are a number of artifacts that help us tell the stories of the Latinx community in Wisconsin. In the collection are various political buttons and posters covering a wide spectrum of political activity. In addition to the political activities, there are also items that tell the stories of families trying to make Wisconsin home, such as a bunk bed used by the Contreras family, or migrant cultural workers who were from Merced, Texas, who worked on a cucumber farm in the 1940s through the 1980s, or a t-shirt from a local Spanish radio station. These are just a few items from our collections that help to illuminate the Hispanic and Latinx experience in our state and across the country. Despite the many stories in our collection, there are many stories that still need to be told. So we're hoping that the collecting efforts that Abby and Daniel spoke of will continue to grow our collections to be able to share those new stories into the future.
Thank you, Lisa. I'm here to talk a little bit about some of the publications and events that the press has been working on for Hispanic and Latinx culture. Next slide. Here we go. So actually tonight in the HQ auditorium at 6 p.m., Jesus Salas, it's the gentleman who founded Obreros Unidos. He was also a professor at the UW and on the Board of Regents at one point. He is going to be speaking about his memoir. It's kind of the memoir of his life, but also of the workers' movement. He is going to be teamed up, as he was here in South Milwaukee in this event photo, with Sergio Gonzalez, who you've already heard about, but he's the author of our press book, Mexicans in Wisconsin. Speaking of press books, we do have a publication showcasing our Somos Latinas oral histories. And I'm happy to say I just found out this morning that Adelante did a program on Somos Latinas and interviewed many of the women and showcased the book and the project, etc. That program has been nominated for a regional Emmy. And I don't have the details of when that'll be announced, but that's pretty cool. We might be Emmy, partly to do with Emmy winning. Yay! We also have our first dual language book in Spanish and English for young readers. Chris Plata, he was a migrant worker as a child and became a very famous musician in Wisconsin. And if you get a chance to look at it on the press YouTube page, he did a great book bites where he did two of them, one in English and one in Spanish, Facebook programs during the pandemic for kids, sharing the story of migrant workers. And that's pretty cool. And of course, we have the textbook, and we have it in Spanish as well as English, Nuestro Estado, Nuestra Historia. Most of these books have discussion questions, curriculum tied in that the education team worked on with us. And as I mentioned before, some of them have YouTube videos. Sergio also did a Book Bites program, and I believe Tess Arenas did as well. And then the Wisconsin Magazine of History has showcased quite a lot of Latinx history. Most recently, Mexicans in Wisconsin has been mentioned. The cherry picking migrant worker highlighted story by Sergio Gonzalez. And this fall, the brand new issue is an excerpt of Obreros Unidos from the book. And watch too for our authors all this month are going to be among those featured on different public media, whether it's print or PBS or WORT radio. Also, the Adelante program has interviewed Jesus as well for an upcoming program, I think airing in October. So that's all very exciting. Thank you.
Thank you, Kristen. Scott O'Donnell, Site Director at Circus World, to speak about the Hispanic and Latinx influence on the circus world globally, not here at Circus World, although that as well. Outside of some specific cultural, specific circus companies, such as the Shanghai Acrobats or the Moscow State Circus, there is not a circus on the planet that does not have a Latinx or Hispanic presence to this very day. Could trace it back to Incan times when voladores or acrobatic flyers descended like birds on tethers, involved in religious ceremonies. Those skills exist to this very day in circus arts like the straps or silks or flying trapeze, which we'll talk about in just a little bit. The ceremonies also included log juggling, which we now feature in circuses still to this day as foot juggling. And the first account of those that we have is from 1528. Classic Mayan art features acrobats frequently depicted with their legs arching over their heads, a skill that we now know as contortionists in the circus. By 1670, maromaros, or acrobats, were noted in bullfighting and rodeo presentations in our Latin American countries. The tradition of La Carpa presentations, tented shows that featured theater and circus and music, was the predominant art form. It really replaced theater for a long period of time, which was viewed as theater for the rich, where La Carpa was circus for the everyman. The presence of Mexican circuses in Texas is first recorded in 1852. By the time they got to America, Mexican circuses had already incorporated aspects of the Italian, English, and American circus, such as the English style of Auguste clowns with baggy pants and red wigs, or clowning in Latino countries known as payasos. For Latino circuses, the family was all important, as it is in all of Hispanic cultures. Ties were strong and everyone participated to make the show a success, such as the Atayde family circus, which was the slide previous to this. The Atayde family starts their circus in 1888, 4 years after the Ringling Brothers. That said, they are one of the longest family-run circuses still in existence 135 years later. Ooh, we're buzzing right along. At any given time in Mexico City, an average circus, you can attend up to 18 different family circuses in Mexico City, with family names like Atayde, Gasca, Tahani, Fernandez, Lopez, Garcia, and many others. Some items from our collection include, on the previous slide, an 1880 Circuit Cardinal Herald, a temp pass to the Gasca Brothers Circus from 1869. You get those handed out if you help set up the big top tent. They were good for 2 seats. Important thing to get for sure. Circo Atayde bumper sticker from the 1970s and a letterhead from 1906 from the Gran Circo Teatro Oran. Now we have a full sheet litho from 1936 from the famous Yacapi teeterboard troupe from Argentina. There is no tolerance for mistakes. Everything had to be perfect, said Alfred Yacapi of his grandfather's instruction. And it paid off, being hired as the center ring attraction in 1935 for America's largest show, Ringling Brothers Barnum & Bailey Circus. Next door is a one sheet from their Argentinian circus, Circo de la Victoria, which played Cuba in 1929. And the litho below it from 1870 from the Van Ambergen Company's traveling menagerie, which featured Brazilian acrobats. Next slide, please. Program from Circo Union, as well as the title of the Circus Gasca family. 2 lithos from Circus Janos Bells, started by an English clown, Ricardo Bell, who found his home by playing Mexico through his entire life. His circus started in 1906. The Ringling Brothers on the next slide crossed the border many times to play in Mexico. This advertisement is from 1942. Next slide. There it is. Shows the scale of performance that they brought over. Next door is the seminal book on the history of circus in Mexico, all 600 and some pages of it. La Fabulosa Historia del Circo en Mexico. It's a fantastic read. Next door to that is a promotional photo from the Guyona family, the first family of flight. Next slide, please. Some of the greatest stars in our circus industry, both here in America and around the world, were Hispanic and Latinx families, the Flying Guyonas, and Tito Guyona in particular, a 5th-generation circus family who dominated the circus ring with their stunning technique and showbiz bravado. They were the first flying act to win the coveted Golden Clown Award in 1978 at the Monte Carlo Circus Festival, which is like the Academy Awards of circus festivals in our industry. Tito started flying when he was 15 years of age in 1964, and he started with a bang, becoming the first flyer to present the legendary triple somersault while blindfolded at the tender age of 15. He was featured in Time magazine. He was on The Tonight Show, a legendary performer in our family. Not to be outdone, next slide, please. Another circus superstar was Benito del Oro. She was a true worldwide circus superstar. She was born in Spain in 1931 and ruled the air on the Washington trapeze, which you can see down below. Her balancing on her head will keeping her equilibrium while 40 feet up in the air on that Washington trapeze. She was absolutely the star of our genre and our culture around the world during the 1950s and 60s. She was an impressive center ring superstar on Ringling Brothers for 7 consecutive seasons. She survived 3 near fatal falls during her career, but refused to give up. She was the featured aerialist on Ringling Brothers when Cecil B. DeMille decided to make his seminal Oscar-winning Best Picture, The Greatest Show on Earth, in 1952. However, she refused to be in that movie because at the time they would not allow her to have a screen credit, and she was going to stand up for her rights, and she decided not to be part of that. She retired in 1970 to Las Palmas, where she transformed her home into a small circus museum. So celebrating her history and the history of the circus. Next slide, please. So lots of aerialists going on. There was the hunt for this elusive thing during the 1970s because there were many flying trapeze acts, the majority of them Hispanic and Latinx, that were doing triple somersaults. And everybody thought, can we push physics to its limit in the human condition and accomplish a quadruple somersault? Well, this gentleman was the one that finally cracked that amazing feat of human determination. In 1981, Miguel Vasquez became the first human in history to achieve the tremendous accomplishment of a quadruple somersault. He went on to achieve it an amazing 2,987 times during his flying career, with an approximate 85% of each attempt landed. That's amazing. I mean, most people that throw triple somersaults can't hit that statistic. Miguel, after retiring to this very day, is still involved in the circus business and is currently a head rigger for Cirque du Soleil at their Ka show in Las Vegas. Next slide, please. We stand moments away, next slide, moments away, weeks away, I should say, from the relaunch of Ringling Brothers Barnum and Bailey Circus, which has been on hiatus since 2017, I should say. To be featured on that show is the Lopez family. They are a 6th-generation Mexican high wire family that have traveled throughout their career through Mexico, Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras. Soon they will be debuting their new act, which is all the way over on the far right there. It's a triple high wire. They'll be wearing wires or cameras on it so that it's broadcast to the audience what their vision looks like while they are on that slender wire, which is no bigger than the circumference of your finger. And if you want to see them live, the 3rd town on Ringling Brothers tour is at the 5 Serve Center in Milwaukee on October 13th to 15th. So you can go check out the Lopez family and the relaunch of Ringling Brothers. Next slide, please. Continuing the generational circus cultures is important to what we present here every year at Circus World. This season was no exception. All the way over on the left was 6th-generation circus superstar Sion España. His family presented a flying act here last year. This summer, he was Diablo presentation and German Wheel. Next door to him, 4th-generation circus performer Sebastian Videla, who presented his unicycle act. Next door to him, Armando Loyal, our 9th-generation elephant trainer. That's a legacy that goes back to the Napoleonic times. Next door to him is a 6th-generation circus performer, Adriana Poema, who is an Argentinian circus family. Her brother happens to own, next slide, please, the circus tent that we present our circuses under. Not only that, La Carpa of our big top at Circus World was made by the Mendoza tent making company, which is in Mexico City. So not only was it built there, it's erected by all of our Latinx circus performers each season, and it is filled to the gills with lots of Latinx performers as well. Last slide. For those that might want to connect further with the circus arts, particularly under Hispanic or Latinx direction, there's a couple of opportunities in this great nation. Circus Vasquez has a couple of units that crisscross North America. It was founded in 1969. first shows in America are 1993. It's currently on tour, coming to a big community near you. If you get a chance, go see it. Also, Circus Caballero has 2 units. They're particularly on the West Coast. But boy, has this family ever cracked the quadruple somersault. They have 4 family members that currently are throwing quadruple somersaults underneath their big top tents. And also Circus Vargas, which you see there, which is another California-based show, is owned and operated by the Flying Tabaras family. So much circus impact and influenced by Hispanic and Latinx. This is really the 100,000-foot view of the influence from its very origins to this very day in the circus industry.